Well, welcome to the Passive Investing Made Simple Masterclass. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins-Hutten. And today I'm excited. We are going to hold a big webinar, big discussion on the 4 rules of wealth that the ultra rich actually follow. But more than likely, you didn't learn in school. Now, hopefully, some of these rules may, be somewhat familiar with to you. Others maybe not. But we are going to demystify the 4 big rules that ultra wealthy actually abide by in order to fortify their portfolio, but also build and scale. Now, we do this webinar live every Tuesday to help you learn the ins and outs of passive investing, to help you turn your active income and savings into long-term passive income and wealth. Now, maybe you've actually invested in a passive deal before and you're kind of like, whoa, that deal did not align with my expectations. I maybe didn't do enough due diligence on it. I didn't know what questions to ask. Or maybe you actually have tried looking into passive investing before, but you just couldn't pull the trigger, or you are a seasoned investor, several deals under your belt, and you're looking to level up your skills. Everybody will get value out of today's webinar. Now, I thought the picture here was going to pull up. So if you're looking at the webinar, you're seeing the big blank screen here. That's supposed to be a picture of me and my family, my crazy crew, the whole reason why I invest in real estate, both actively and passively. Now, if this is the first time and you and I are meeting, I have been investing in real estate since about 2002, scaled a active portfolio, have over 800 million in assets in partnership there. But I've also done the passive side of things. And that's what I love teaching you here is how can you take your time and attention that you're probably spending in scaling your own business, scaling somebody else's business as a W-2 worker. How can you take that and turn that into passive income and long-term wealth? Because when we learn how to do those skills, we can actually get 100% control and choice on how we spend our time. Now, most people probably will still continue working or contributing to society at some point in time. Not everybody wants to sit on the beach drinking Mai Tais, or, margaritas would be my drink of choice. Anyways, I teach you how to do this in my book, Money for Tomorrow. It's published with Bigger Pockets. You can either find it at biggerpockets.com or on amazon.com. Now, what we are covering today, the 4 rules that the ultra wealthy actually abide by, I cover this in this book in greater detail. But today I'm going to be able to give you a overarching framework for you to work from. That way, when you get the book, or if you decide to dive in further in any of these rules, you know how to start applying this to your own investing portfolio. But again, our goal for me personally, and what I teach our investors how to do, is how can you leverage passive investing more than likely in real estate or in real estate-backed businesses in order to get 100% control and choice on how you spend your time. All right. We're having some technical glitches here today, but we'll just cruise right on past that. We can actually help you do that at passiveinvesting.com. And so at the end of today's webinar, you can fill out the form at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. There you can jump on a one-on-one call with me. Let's talk through how you can apply what you learn in today's webinar to your passive investing portfolio in order to grow and scale it to achieve what you want. All right. You also, when you fill out that form, you get access to our priority deals and, of course, a wealth of other information to help you on your investing journey. All right. So I started out today's webinar that we're going to cover the full 4 rules that the ultra high net worth investors actually abide by. Now, I did not learn this in school. I learned this through the school of hard knocks. This was my experience, how I put this framework together, not only through learning through other people, my mentors, the people that I look up to, the investors I look up to, but also when I was working in my family over the course of the past 15 years, settling 5 different estates, 3 of which were probates, 2 of which were trusts, which is going to be extremely important when we talk about one of our rules today. Now, what I saw there was all the different ways that these estates lost money. Now, a lot of times we think of the word estate, we're thinking, wow, somebody's going to get money. More than likely, not the case. Okay. More than likely, an estate, especially here in the United States, if we're playing the odds, generally doesn't have that much money, or if it did have money, a lot of it gets eroded. Now, in settling these 5 different estates, I back of the napkin math, about $700,000 were lost across those 5 estates that I could just quickly count up. Now, most people would think $700,000, especially if you're listening right here, would be like, well, that's a lot of money, but that's not earth-shattering. What's earth-shattering is whenever we start taking that loss and then compounding it. Even if we could just have kept that $700,000 in those estates, that wealth passed on to the next generation, and they did nothing but play the averages in the stock market at 7% return over 30 years. That's $5.3 million loss to future generations. Now, if you didn't think keeping $700,000 within an estate was enough to get you going, what about keeping $5.3 million? Okay, that is the true cost of not learning how money works, what the objective is, what the rules are, and the strategies that are going to help you win the game. All right, so today's webinar, again, it's based on my book, Money for Tomorrow. Okay, very high level. We're not going to go down any strategy too deep. But I want to put this all in front of you. That way you can figure out where the holes are in your financial foundation and what do you need to tackle in order to build and scale your wealth. All right, but as always, webinars are for education. Doesn't matter where you look online. This is not financial advice, tax advice, legal advice. So always take this information back to your investing team and figure out how it works with your situation. All right, so we're going to talk about the 4 rules, but let's put this in the context of a game. All right, how do you win the wealth game, right? Really, that's what we're trying to figure out here. Well, first, it requires that you know the objective of winning the wealth game, which if we're going to equate this to the board game Monopoly, he with the most money, he or she with the most money at the end of the game, most money and most properties, the highest value of their entire estate wins. Okay. But I'm going to define wealth here as having enough money coming in passively to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. Okay. Now we have to understand the 4 rules, and we're going to cover those today. We have to learn how to create money with what the tools we're already given, what's already in our ecosystem. We have to learn how to keep it or defend it. And then once we can find money within our own ecosystem, create and keep that and defend it, then we can start taking the surplus and growing it, and then we're going to protect it. Okay, so those are the 4 rules. All right, and each of these rules are going to have habits and tactics that the high net worthy master. All right, so again, generational wealth is when you have enough passive income that covers all your desired living expenses. So you can do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. But when we add the word generational in front of the word wealth, we want to also be able to pass this framework on, the wealth on to our heirs, both in dollars and in knowledge, and so they can steward what you've already created. All right. And again, the rules in order to win the game are creating wealth, keeping it, defending it, growing it, and then passing it on. Now, most people might go, okay, Jan, I'm out. Hopefully that's not you. And the reason is a lot of people are so in tune on learning how to maybe cut their expenses to the bone so they can grow their wealth, that they forget that 2 of the most vital steps you can do in your wealth building journey is learning how to defend your wealth, but also how to pass it on to the next generation so it's not eroded. So I find a lot of investors are very heavy on learning how to create and grow, very light. They grossly neglect the rules 2 and 4, which is keeping your wealth and passing it on. But we're going to dive through each one of these rules, okay? And I'm going to give you some tactics. If you want to dive deeper into the tactics, feel free to reach out to me at whitney@passiveinvesting.com. You can also grab my book, Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth. I want to be a resource to you for here. Okay, so rule number one, create wealth. Now, I'm going to put this in front of you. And you might go, Whitney, I already knew how to do this. Track income and expenses, put together a balance sheet. Okay, I already know how to do those two steps. But the question is, are you doing it well? Are you doing it consistently? Are you consistent and persistent in keeping track of what's flowing into your world, what's flowing out? Are you consistent and persistent in knowing of what assets you have in your portfolio? What role do they serve? And then are you creating alignment in order to win the game? Now, when we talk about tracking income and expenses, again, we're not going to dive deep in any one of these categories, but I always want my investors to leverage technology if you are open to that, because I'm not talking about ChatGPT or AI, right? But tools like Simplify, Monarch Money. Are we tracking our income and expenses so we can make informed decisions and identify opportunities in order to create alignment with how we're spending our money? Also, when you have a system like that, you could probably also build, in most cases, your balance sheet within that system. So you understand what assets you have that are bringing in income, what liabilities are sucking income out of your ecosystem. And then also at any point in time, you always know your net worth so you can do strategic planning, right? Now, my favorite part to work with investors on is actually the alignment piece, because so many people look at tracking income and expenses and balance sheet as like very boring work. I do it. Maybe I keep track of it like every 6 months. Maybe I sit down once a year when it comes to tax time and I put together my books for my taxes. All right. But if we are doing this on a bi-weekly basis, monthly basis, we can actually make informed decisions, and we can also create alignment with what we truly want in life. And I'm going to show you a broad spectrum on how to do this. We already covered why we should track income and expenses, so we can find that financial clarity, to help us build the wealth, right? It's much like I coach kids soccer. All the little kids, all the 7-year-olds, they're watching soccer on television and they want to learn how to do the cool bicycle kick, the cool jumping header over the goalie so they score a goal. I need them to know how to run around the field, dribble a ball, and pass to each other. If they can do those three things, I can teach them any other part of the game. All right. So tracking income and expenses, we know that that's a core skill, but we want to start creating alignment here. And so in my book, Money for Tomorrow, I describe a system on how you can actually categorize your expenses into 4 different categories. Okay. What's destroying your wealth? What helps you produce wealth? What helps protect your wealth? And then our lifestyle expenses. And I give you a whole framework to analyze these 4 categories and make decisions on how to eliminate destructive expenses, take your productive and protective expenses and get them as optimized as possible. Okay, just addressing those 3 categories alone will probably pick you up hundreds, if not a few $1,000s a month. Okay, and then you can tackle the lifestyle expenses. Like if you're like me, getting your kid on board, getting your spouse on board with reducing spending in different categories or redirecting spending in lifestyle categories can feel like a lot like hot pokers under the fingernails. Okay, but you can get a huge way with learning how to manage the destructive, productive, and protective expenses. All right. Now, once you identify savings, once you have created this alignment with what you want to do, and I mean the experiences you want to have in life, how do you want to grow in your life? How do you want to give back to your community, whether it's in your time, knowledge, and expertise? Once you create this alignment on how you're spending money with those 3 areas, experiences, growth, and giving back, now we can identify the savings we have, and we got to give that money a job. Now, if you need an emergency fund, if you need 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months worth of expenses, we're going to build that first. All right. If you've got that taken care of, do you have any high interest consumer debt that is not cash flowing? Now, I'm not talking about debt on rental properties. I'm talking about car loans, student loans, stuff like that, that you're just like, ooh, I can't make this cash flow. It needs to go. Okay. Any debt that's going to impact your debt to income ratio, that's going to keep you from acquiring a cash flowing asset, that also needs to go too. This will also reduce your stress. All right. Now, once we get that initial reserves built, think about getting more and you get your debt paid off. Think about building your reserves a little bit more. Okay. If you're comfortable with 3 months worth of cushion, start there, then build it to 6. All right. Because while we might be comfortable with only 3 months of reserves in a hot market, if it is a down recessive market, we might need double the runway. Okay. And then once you've got those 3 areas taken care of, start funding your investment accounts, accumulating cash so we can invest. All right. Now, this move alone, like I said, most people kind of go, Whitney, I already know this. I don't need to abide by this rule. I've got it taken care of. Every single investor I've ever worked with, I have always been able to help them find about $50,000 in their own ecosystem that they can save. And yet, you heard that right, 50K. Right now, one of my clients, we're going to call her Wendy for this purposes. We found between her personal and business expenses, $5,000 in savings. That's $60,000 that she could save year over year. That's $60,000 alone, invested at 8% return for 10 years. That's adding $1 million to her net worth. These are not small moves. Okay, these small moves really add up. Right now, tracking your balance sheet, that's the other part in rule number 1, is that you got to know at any point in time, what is your net worth? Now, if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I don't build a portfolio based on net worth. I build it based on cash flow. We're going to talk about that in rule number 3. But it is worthwhile, especially as an investor, if you're an active investor, you need to have a balance sheet at any point in time. And that is to understand your net worth. You're going to take all of your assets together, your real estate that you own, your stocks that you own, cash and cash equivalents, any business interest, add that all together. And then you're going to subtract your liabilities, credit cards, student loans, mortgage loans, auto loans, any sort of loan or debt, right? The difference between the two, assets minus liabilities, is your net worth. Okay. This can be one of the biggest scorecards that you can have as far as like, are you heading in the right direction with accumulating assets that will set you free? Right. I encourage my investors to update their balance sheet minimally on a quarterly basis. If not, once you get that skill flexed and built, maybe you can extend that to every 6 months, maybe even a year. But from any active investor or investor starting off, if you don't have a clean balance sheet, update that quarterly so you can keep track of your scorecard. Now, same client, Wendy, when we put together her balance sheet, we cleaned it up. We found $100,000 that she had in an old IRA account. Okay. Now you're like, wow, okay, so how she had an asset in an old account, what does that matter? Well, we found out because we had this balance sheet, we could see that this asset was underperforming. When we redirected that into a self-directed IRA, we were able to put that money to work at a higher level for her. And that 100K at 8% invested over 10 years was going to add another 220,000 to her net worth. Okay, so now we're up to, just 2 small moves. In rule number 1, Wendy has already added $1.2 million to her net worth over 10 years. All right, now for my business owners, real estate investors, doesn't matter, side hustlers, always keep your personal and business expenses separate. All right, I know a lot of people want to earn credit card points for miles and get free travel. There are ways to keep your expenses separate and do this, but it's super important that you keep your expenses separate. One, if you have your business in an LLC, we want to maintain what we call our corporate veil. Okay, you want to maintain your legal protection, which means you have to keep separate accounting records. Also, financial visibility. If you have your business and your personal expenses being blended together, it's too easy for you to put things on the wrong credit card, not pay yourself back. Things can get ugly pretty fast. Also, you don't know if your business is actually cash flowing or not. All right. And then we have tax clarity. Your accountant's going to want clean records. The IRS is going to want their 1040 schedules, E's and C's based on clean records as well. And then if you have the two, your personal and business finances separated, you can actually plan for growth. Right. So again, I had one client after 3 years, this client finally separated their business and personal expenses. And when they did that, they realized that the business actually owed her personally for $20,000 for a piece of equipment that she purchased. On top of that, we found over $10,000 annually of recurring costs that were going on the personal credit card and not on the business credit card. Okay. One, we had 20K that should have been capital recovery and put back to use in our own personal investing portfolio. Two, that $10,000 of annual savings that was recouped, that made her realize that her business wasn't as profitable as she thought it was. But we did realize that her personal expenses were better off than she thought it was. But again, that can create hundreds of thousands of dollars in impact, just recognizing those moves. All right, so rule number one, create. We got to get really clear on what money is in our ecosystem and are we accounting for it correctly? Now we got to defend it. We got to keep it. And this is really where I encourage pick up the book Money for Tomorrow. Okay, I dive into each one of these, sneaky ways that we lose wealth pretty heavily. There's also webinars that you can find at passiveinvesting.com on YouTube that I've gone into each one of these in more depth. But the 6 sneaky ways that you're going to lose wealth where people don't defend it well enough are: one, making high interest payments, overpaying for insurance or even underpaying for insurance. We'll talk about that in a second. Paying unnecessary fees on investment fees, banking fees, credit and loan fees, poor tax planning, falling prey to tax traps. One of the biggest ones, and we won't get into it in this webinar, is provisional income. All right, if that's a word that if you're close within 5 to 10 years of retirement, talk to your CPA about provisional income. Arrange your portfolio so you can lessen provisional income. And then lack of incapacity planning, which we'll talk more extensively in rule number 4. But losing money to interest, okay? How can we leverage interest wisely? And what I hear people do is they follow Dave Ramsey and they want to pay down their interest rate or pay down all of the money that they have that they borrowed, but they don't know whether to do a debt snowball or a debt avalanche. Well, this is a mathematical equation right here that can actually give you an index that'll help you understand which you should pay in what order. So you're going to take your loan balance divided by the minimum monthly payment, okay? And that is going to give you an index. And if the index is 50 or below, that means that's a pretty highly efficient debt. This is going to be like your car loans, personal loans, maybe a student loan. Student loan is probably going to tick up here into midterm efficient. All right. But these are the things that we're going to want to get gone. Okay. Now, when we do this for our, say, rental properties or our personal residence, okay, that data is usually, in most cases, mid-efficient to high efficient. Even HELOCs on properties can be pretty efficient as well, right? So we're going to keep those, okay, for the time being. And then anything that falls in between 50 to 100, that's mid-efficient, but we're going to get rid of anything in the danger zone first. Okay, when we're looking at paying down debt, we want to get that gone. In the midterm, mid-efficient zone or the cautionary zone, we're going to want to hang on to that until we get the danger zone eliminated. And then we're going to think about, do we want to refinance that loan, reposition it in some sort of way? Can we somehow lower the minimum monthly payment on that particular debt balance? That gives you a better clarity on how do you pay off debt and in what order. All right. Number two, leveraging insurance wisely. Okay. Make sure that you have health insurance coverage, home and renters insurance, auto insurance, disability insurance, umbrella insurance, life insurance, either term policy or maybe a whole life permanent policy. Where people get in trouble is that they're either overpaying completely for their policies. They're paying for the relationship, not for the actual coverage. They have junk policies or sometimes even duplicate policies. Another way that they get, people kind of get taken for a ride a little bit is that they don't have the appropriate writers in place. So if you say, for instance, you have a home office and you have equipment in your home office that if your house burned to the ground, when that equipment would need to be replaced. Your home or renter's insurance policy probably doesn't cover the home office unless you have a home office or business writer on the policy. This might be where you need a separate business coverage policy as well. All right. Another way that people lose money here is they don't adjust their terms often enough. Now, we've seen, a lot of devastating fires in the news lately, and I'll take the most recent one in my area was a couple years ago when 1,100 homes burnt within 3 hours one afternoon. It was horrendously tragic. Now, most people were probably only insured to about $300,000 on their property. They hadn't adjusted their insurance in quite some time. In that time period between when those properties were built and when the fire occurred, COVID happened. And so labor went up, supply costs went up. And so that $300,000 home was actually a $600,000 home that needed to be rebuilt. And a lot of people struggled to rebuild their homes. They had to come hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket in order to get the home rebuilt. Right? So yes, we want to keep our insurance costs as low as we can, but we want to make sure we have the appropriate coverage, which is more important because insurance, the whole goal is to outsource our liability. All right. And then the last piece here, failing to renegotiate annually. Okay. So you can change insurance policies almost at any point in time. So it is a little arduous, but I shop my car insurance every single year and usually will harvest, a couple $100 savings annually. Same thing with home insurance. I'll shop it every couple years to see if I can harvest some savings there as well. You can also outsource all this work to an insurance broker. All right, investment fees. Investment fees are, we can find that in banking fees, loan fees, but one of the biggest areas that I see erode wealth is actually in retirement fees. Now, if you're watching the video, you are seeing an example that I built out in empower.com, which is a free tool. You guys can use that. What happens if an investor invests in their retirement, self-directed retirement fund, or not even self-directed, their 401k, let's put it that way, for 25 years, they max it out, they're not getting any match from their employer, and we assume that the S&P 500 is growing 7% year over year, and that they're paying a modest 1.5% fee on their retirement portfolio. They're losing 31% of that portfolio to fees alone. And while the fee doesn't really show up in the early years, it's like a death by 1,000 cut. By the time they're retiring after they built their nest egg, that fiduciary advisor and the mutual funds they've invested in, they're making bank off their retirement fees. So even a small drop in reducing your retirement fees can create an immense amount of savings within your retirement portfolio. All right. And this is going to be the last we're going to cover in the keep category, optimize your taxes. You're here because you probably love passive real estate. You probably love real estate in general. Okay. One of the reasons why you probably love real estate is because you like depreciation. You like using that depreciation to cover the income, keep it tax-free or tax sheltered. All right, but there are other ways that we can optimize your taxes. Okay, so work with a qualified tax advisor or tax professional. One, to use um, deductions strategically. All right. Two, learn how to convert your income using through use of entities, sole proprietorship, LLCs, S corps, C corps. Learn how to shift the income. If you have kids, until they turn the age of 18, you can use their 0% tax bracket to shift income from you to them and create an immense amount of savings and possibly set them up for long-term wealth. When you do use deductions strategically, convert income, shift income, that possibly will open you up to credits, okay? That can create some high tax impact, right? The credits are actually a dollar for dollar wash of the tax you owe. So it's super powerful if you can organize your affairs as such to where you can access these credits. And then the last thing is if you have taken advantage of all these other 4 steps, defer your income. You can use qualified IRAs, QRPs, but here's the thing. Most of us are trained to start with deferring our income. Okay. And in all fairness, it is easier to access these other strategies if you have a side hustle or business. Investing in real estate, even passively investing in real estate, allows you to access all the different tax strategies here. Now, my favorite book that I love is Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. You can check that out. Partner with a qualified tax advisor that is knowledgeable in real estate. But the one thing here, I'm going to circle us back to the very beginning. You have to have good record keeping. You have to have good tracking of income and expenses in your balance sheet in order to make your tax strategy work. You have to have good bookkeeping. All right. So provisional income, we're going to skip this for right now, but that is a way to keep our from not triggering double taxation on our Social Security. If you're approaching retirement, partner with your CPA to understand how you can organize your affairs as you approach retirement so you don't trigger that double taxation on your Social Security. Now, an example of this, keep category. I partnered with an investor, Heather. We identified over 55,000 that she could save annually. Okay, not just one time, but annually. And we were able to redirect that initial savings into a fund that returned 8%, allowed it to compound and grow. She's looking at the end of 10 years, adding another $960,000 to her net worth. Now, I have seen investors make powerful moves in rule number 1 and rule number 2 alone and achieve financial freedom. They didn't even have to get to the grow part. So that's what's so exciting here. All right, so rule number 3, you got to learn how to grow money. Okay, now the strategies here is that you have to understand how do you shift from a middle class balance sheet to a rich balance sheet. Okay, so in a middle class balance sheet, your income is largely going to liabilities. You have very few assets. You're going largely to liabilities, and those liabilities generate expenses for you. In a wealthy balance sheet, we are acquiring assets that kick off income, and that income covers any sort of liability that we have. Not only does it give us enough income to cover the liability, it gives us enough income to put in our pocket and live our lifestyle off of. Okay, so that's the balance sheet part. You have to understand what you're trying to grow to, which means you need assets that are going to kick off cash flow, okay? Or kick off enough equity growth that when you're ready to harvest that equity growth, there's enough cash flow for you to live off of in perpetuity all the way into the future. But in order to do this, you have to create an investment roadmap. You need to sit down and define your specific freedoms that you're trying to go after. Are you trying to go after time freedom, location freedom, choice freedom? Everybody is probably searching for some sort of financial freedom. That's just the tool to get the other freedoms. What kind of timeline do you want to achieve that in? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Taking the freedom you're after and the timeline you want to get it done in, What does your portfolio need to deliver in order to hit that freedom? Okay. A lot of people, maybe this is you, you've sat down, you've thought through what you want, when you want it, what your portfolio needs to give you, but then they don't align their risk tolerance and their risk capacity. Okay, so we need to make sure that whatever you're choosing as your investment roadmap, that it actually truly aligns with the risk that you're willing to take and your capacity to be able to take that risk. All right, so let's understand a risk a little bit more. When we're evaluating an asset, and I have plenty of webinars for you at our youtube.com page, passiveinvestingdot.com, on how to evaluate or even, dive deeper into structuring your growth portfolio. But risk, that's a huge conversation we need to talk about. Because areas of risk, where are you in investing in the capital stack? The different layers of money of going into a deal. Are you the bank that's going to get paid back first? Are you in junior position behind the bank, meaning that if the investment went sideways, the bank gets paid off and then you get paid off in the mezzanine or junior position? Or are you in the highest risk, highest reward position as part owner in the common equity position? Or are you in some other unsecured position and not even part of the capital stack to the deal? All right. So again, when we're understanding risk, when you look at your assets, you need to understand where do you want to invest in the capital stack? And you might be in two or three different positions. You might build a portfolio with some debt assets in there that kick off cash flow, and then also some common equity assets that kick off growth. All right. What kind of asset type do you want to go into? Do you want to be in residential real estate, commercial real estate? Do you want to do more type of land deals and development deals, right? Every type of asset class is going to have its different risks and rewards associated with it. Also think about when you're understanding risk, what kind of business plan do you want to invest in? Do you want to be in just stabilized deals? Okay, meaning you're just going to hold on to the deal for say 5, 7, 10 years and let it grow. Or are you willing to roll up your sleeves and put in some elbow grease and actually do some sort of value add strategy on the property in order to force the growth on the property? Or are you or the operator super endeavorous and want to actually start from a blank slate from the ground up and develop it? All of those different business plans have those risks. What kind of structure or concentration risk are you willing to take? If you're a passive investor, are you going to go into one asset? Are you going to invest into a portfolio of assets? Are you going to go into an open fund or even a blind fund of many assets? Or are you investing through somebody else to aggregate money and that person's going to put the money into the fund? It's like a fund of fund structure. Every single one of those type of structure and concentration risk also has their different risk profile with it. All right. So when you're looking at deals, when you're putting together your investment thesis, sit here and look at the capital stack, business plan, asset type, and concentration risk structure and really be honest with yourself. What risk are you willing to take to get the reward? All right, now the last three, these are things we want to make sure we need to understand the risk exists and we need to ask the questions to mitigate it. But when we invest, we need to plan for business interruptions. It's not a matter of if they're going to happen, it's a matter of when. Now, this can happen in stocks, bonds, and mutual fund investing. It can happen in real estate. It can happen in any business investing. So what are you doing? What is the operator doing to mitigate income fluctuations? Capital calls. Capital calls, nobody likes them, nobody wants them, but you have to prepare for unexpected cash needs. This can happen even in your own home. A major storm rolls through and now you got to replace the roof. Hopefully you have insurance to help you with that. Maybe the water heater goes out. Capital calls happen. We need to make sure we have liquidity and reserves set aside to mitigate capital call risk. Now, fraud risk, protecting against bad actors, though that comes with our due diligence checklist, we're trying to ask a number of questions, do our research on the investor, on the operator, and ensure that we are investing with somebody that's reputable. All right, so that's all part of the grow part of the plan, okay? Putting together your investor thesis. Now, pivoting a little bit, still part of the investor thesis, we want to make sure that you are investing according to the 7 pillars of wealth. These are the areas that are going to generate money. So think of this of taking that long due diligence checklist that you might have downloaded from an investor forum. That was somebody else's checklist they used. We're so thankful that you have that, but now we need to arrange that into these 7 categories. When you look at a deal, how is that deal preserving your capital, helping you create cash flow, creating equity for you, okay, creating diversification within your portfolio, generating tax benefits? Is it using leverage or lending appropriately? And then if you're doing this passively, are you investing with an expert operator? If you are investing in your own deals, are you the expert operator? Now, not every deal should have or will have all 7 pillars. Okay. We need to look at and making sure our entire portfolio together is providing the 7 pillars. All right. Now, to dive in, there's 4 that are, I would call 4 of these pillars that are like, you got to have them. And not every deal, but these are the top 4 that are going to give you like 80% of the results. I know if you're looking on the webinar, there's only 3 listed on the screen. I'll get to the 4th in a second. 1, we want to make sure that we're investing in deals that preserve our money. Let's not get knocked out of the game. Okay. It's not to say that we won't, but we want to limit this as much as possible. 2, if we can get cash flow, okay, that's going to tell us that things are stable in today's environment, and hopefully we can grow that over time. All right, so we're looking for deals where there's multiple streams of income, say like a multifamily property, multiple customers with an express car wash, multiple borrowers, say like within a debt fund, that there's ways for us to grow that cash flow and that the fund itself or the deal itself has reserves. And then is there ways that we can get equity levers? Now, you might get cash flow and equity, you might get cash flow, or you might get equity. But definitely, these are 2 powerful levers, but we have to have the first, the capital preservation. The most important lever here is the diversification piece. I would say of the investors that I worked with over the past, say 5, 4-ish years, a lot of investors tapped into common equity positions and totally just poo-pooed the debt positions, creating that predictable cash flow within their portfolio. And when cash flow compresses, it does every market cycle, but when the cash flow compresses on an equity investment, they didn't have any supporting cash flow from a debt investment behind it. All right. So those are the top 4 tenets we want to make sure we have. Now, how are we going to pour some gas on the fire here, okay, in growing our portfolio? Well, that's taking advantage of tax benefits, maybe use of leverage, and then investing with expert operators, meaning we get to go do what our zone of genius is, and then we can leverage other people to help grow our investment portfolio. Now, an investor of mine, she had 1.5 million in assets that were underutilized. They were earning, I don't know, probably close to like a 3 or 4% return. And when we took a look at her balance sheet, we repositioned some things, and she told me I need 150K minimum in cash flow coming in for me to feel like I can walk away from my business. We identified those 1.5 million assets, redirected it into an investment that yielded 10%, goal achieved in 6 months. Okay. Now, we might want to take a smoother ride, right? In deploying this capital over time, but Wendy was in the position and ready to do this immediately. All right, rule number 4, keeping wealth. So really keeping wealth breaks down into 3 high-level strategies. 1, you got to plan for your incapacity, which also is in our keep wealth. Sorry guys. Rule number 4, pass wealth on. Okay. So the plan for incapacity is also in the keep wealth category. It's in the pass wealth on category. Okay, we'll talk about that in greater detail. Phase two is, are you going to use a will or trust? Okay, executing the wealth transfer system. Okay, that's just one part of it. And then we got to execute our stewardship plan. We got to train our heirs, train our executors. So in the phase one, planning for incapacity, we don't know at any point in time. We don't know if we're going to slip, trip, and fall and hit our head and like be in a coma for a while. If you guys are watching the video, I recently had shoulder surgery. I mean, thankfully, it went all according to plan, but stranger things have happened in surgical environments. So you have to understand, how do we keep your health from draining your wealth? Okay. So some key things to have in place is your living will, healthcare directives, and power of attorneys. Now, two things that keep people from doing this. One, nobody likes talking about death and dying or being incapacitated. That's a conversation for another day. I encourage you to have that conversation today. Number two, nobody understands the laws and how not having these tools in place can actually drain their wealth. Meaning, if you don't have a living will, healthcare directive, and power of attorney, something happens to you, you're in your state, your spouse or your parent, your closest relative may not be the one that gets to be in charge of your healthcare decisions. Okay, it's not just a slam dunk. You have to have these papers in place. They may actually have to go file, through a lawyer to file some sort of suit with the hospital or state in order to get control of your health. Okay, so please plan for your incapacity. Have these papers in place. You can combine this with phase number two, which is passing your assets on. Okay, the wealth transfer system. All right. But again, most people actually delay this type of estate planning because they don't think their estate's that complicated. All right. They don't want to spend the money to do it. Why should I spend $3,000 setting up a trust? I'll just let my heirs take it through probate, and we'll talk about that here in a second. They assume people already know their wishes, or they assume their heirs aren't going to fight, which is not always the case, or they just procrastinate. So I call this part of the I love you plan. People are already going to be grieving you. Let's let them grieve because you've already done the work and answered the questions on how you want that money to move, from your state to theirs. One of the simplest things and cheapest things you can do is set up paid on death beneficiaries. So tonight, you can go into all of your checking accounts, certificates of deposits, IRAs, brokerage accounts, investment accounts, stocks and securities, real estate, life insurance. Tonight, you can do this. Set up a paid on death beneficiary. That'll keep all of these assets out of probate. Okay? That's what we want. We don't want these assets hitting probate and becoming public knowledge for creditors and predators. Okay, step number two in this wealth transfer system is the actual legal document, whether it's a will or a trust. I have a screenshot here that you can take. A will, the easiest way I can describe it is your heir's way of suing your estate to get your assets. Okay. Whereas the trust never dies. You can move your assets into the trust, and the trust just, the one set of trustees dies and the next trustee takes over. Okay. It's a pretty smooth process. Now, there is a cost difference, upfront cost difference. It's just a few $100s for a will, a few $1,000s for a trust. Where the difference is on the back end. I researched what it would cost to settle a will, a probate, for somebody with a wealth between $1 to $5 million. On average, in the United States, it's $17,000 to $33,000. Okay, whereas a revocable trust could be, to settle a revocable trust might just be $0 to a couple $1,000s to do. Okay, so the will is very public. Everybody will know your business. The trust is very private. All right, so take a look at this graph and understand which situation best fits you and talk to your lawyer about this because they're going to be able to know your situation the best. All right. Then number three, creating the I love you plan. All right. Again, part of this I love you plan is go ahead and set those, pass on, paid on death beneficiaries. Okay. Make that wealth transfer as simple as you can. And then once you have your documents in place, make sure to tell your executor, train your executor, where are they at? How do you want them to be used? Okay, give them a heads up. And then train your heirs, and you can train your heirs, prepare them to manage what you have created, what you have grown. You've done all this work of creating, keeping, and growing your wealth. Don't let it be eroded by this wealth transfer. And you can teach your heirs to steward wealth through books, through games, through documenting your life experience. All right, I want to leave a few minutes for Q&A. I do see a few questions popping into the chat box here, but if you want more information, you want to dive down any one of these rabbit holes deeper, check out my book, Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth. You can snag it on Amazon. As always, I'm also available to you. You can reach out to me at whitney@passiveinvesting.com. You can also fill out the form passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com, and we can set up a one-on-one call to discuss your investing goals and how we can help you here at passiveinvesting.com. Now, I want to leave you with a parting question before we open up the floor. Will you be that transitional character in your family that does this work, that keeps those hundreds of thousands of dollars in your ecosystem so that you can grow not only your family's wealth, but future generations? All right, guys, if you're here live, don't go anywhere. We're about to start the Ask Me Anything part of the show. Oh, somebody said, I agree with shopping insurance. I shop mine every 6 months. That is amazing. You win the gold star. I don't know if I could do that every 6 months, but I do encourage all my investors to do that at least once a year. At the time of renewal for the policy, I've found that and if your auto is renewing every 6 months, maybe that's a good thing to do, but definitely on an annual basis, because, with your home insurance, they see that you're about to renew and they want that check. They know they've got very limited time to win and earn your business. And it's easier now than ever to like shop insurances. Um, it's still not the easiest thing to do, but it's getting easier now. It's much more transparent process. Oh yeah, the auto insurance. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Have I done podcasts with this? This is turned into a podcast, our Passive Investing Made Simple show. I would love to hear what you mean by that. Feel free to elaborate, because if you guys need tools, I'm here to help create those for you. I want everybody to be able to build and scale their wealth. Does anybody have any questions? I know this one went really long, but it is something that I'm passionate about. I make sure that I cover all these 4 rules at least once a year, because there's always, we might dial in one rule and then like the next year, we're ready to hear the second rule to scale it and build our portfolio.